So I was going to do a cute rom-com themed video for Valentine's Day. I've had it outlined for a few weeks now, but me and my boyfriend just broke up, and the thought of sitting through 10 plus movies with happy, lovey, sappy endings made me want to punch a wall. So I decided to hashtag choose myself and make a video that better aligns with my current emotional state. Okay? Originally, that was going to be something about the worst popular ships of all time or current cursed crack ships. Let me know if those topics are of interest for future videos, by the way. And then it hit me, why don't I bump up my season 2 High School Musical, the series video since
everything is terrible, love is dead,
and my heart is just broken enough to justify Portwell. So we start off right before winter break with the first song of the season, Something in the Air. The song was cute, very Disney, very not going on my playlist, but the choreo was impressive and it gave us a lot of interesting foreshadowing with both the lyrics and the blocking. First, when Ricky and Nene sing together, "Promise me you'll never let go, it's winter break but we'll never break apart." Then, while they're still holding hands, Gina runs right through them singing, "I'm gonna make my mark." Excellent. No notes. As a fan of Gina and not a fan of Ricky and Nene, this 10-second run was very pleasing to me. Also, the way the song is set up tells me immediately that this is not the cute little theater show I got into last year. In season 1, there was an emphasis on realism. Even though it was a musical show, they focused on diegetic sound, which basically means we didn't hear music that we could not realistically justify the characters hearing too. The songs leaned acoustic rather than overproduced, and the characters remained in character as they sang their songs. There wasn't such a reliance on B-roll, and songs weren't framed as music videos. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but this changed drastically in the season, and I can't lie, I was a little disappointed about that. Anyway, in the first few minutes of this episode, we learn that Ricky's dad can no longer afford his childhood home, so they are moving into a small apartment. Nene is leaving for a yak in a few days and still hasn't told anyone but Courtney, and Gina has moved in with Ashlyn. Very productive winter break, I'd say. Ricky and Nene had even less chemistry in this episode than last year. Their scenes were genuinely painful to watch, and not the good kind of painful. The only scene that didn't feel like nails on a chalkboard to me was when Nene came over to Ricky's and they exchanged Christmas gifts. We got a very sweet, I think it was a Joshua Bassett original, acoustic song about Nene being the perfect gift. No notes. And then Ricky calls Nene his home. The same night, he finds out he's about to lose his home. There are levels to this. While Carlos and Miss Jen are out costume shopping during winter break, a perfectly appropriate activity between a teacher and her student, by the way, they run into one of our new characters of the season. Zachy Roy is both Miss Jen's high school ex-boyfriend and the new musical director at North High. He brags about their entry into the Menkeys, which is basically their in-universe Jimmy Awards. Even if you haven't heard of the Jimmys, I'm sure you've heard of some of their winners. The winning school of the Menkeys gets a $50,000 cash prize and a college scholarship, which would have been a very meaningful tie-in to High School Musical 3 if the showrunner of the show ever bothered to finish that movie, but whatever. Whatever. Fast forward to Ashlyn and Gina's New Year's Eve party, and if you were wondering if they were just going to sweep Rena under the rug and go full send on Rini, they have this insane moment that just tells us the exact opposite. And then this first instance of him mixing up his girls.
I resolve to follow my dreams however far away they take me.
Well, that's gotta be Gina, right?
Nope, not me.
It's me, actually.
And it won't be the last.
That's my cousin.
You know the words once upon a time make you listen. There's a reason. Come on, G. When you dream, there's a chance you'll find little laughter
or happy ever after. You're a harmony to the melody echoing inside my head.
The only kiss at midnight is Redlin, which is more foreshadowing that the only couple that will last through this season will be Redlin. We're just going to pretend it's not weird that Miss Jen then walks into Ashlyn's house comfortably and completely unannounced to let the kids know that they will be putting on Beauty and the Beast instead of High School Musical 2 as they originally expected. Put on the spot about committing to the new musical, Nene finally tells Ricky and the rest of the East High Drama Club that she's moving to Denver in a few days. End scene. So we meet the spawn of Satan, Lily, whatever her last name is. She makes a huge deal about meeting the drama club, which is so funny because, like, they're not cool. Anyway, the auditions are taking place today, and a lot happens. Ashlyn asks Courtney and Gina to do a tercet with her, which is basically a duet, but for 3 singers instead of 2. Courtney's all in, but Gina is hesitant because she really wants to make her mark on her own. Hot take, sorry, but I wish she had stuck to that and done something by herself because 1-2-3 was hot Disney Junior garbage, and the girl who wrote Wondering 4 months ago would have never, ever written that. It was also the first time I realized I might not like this season. Also, Ricky goes back and forth all day about trying out for the musical because Nene won't be there, but what finally convinces him is this nasty and unprofessional read from Mr. Mazzara. Maybe he needed to hear those words for his development, but wrong messenger and absolutely wrong delivery. Carlos asks Gina to be his co-choreographer, and she turns him down because, once again, she is trying to make her mark alone. And I get that. Her entire life has been dictated by the whims of her mother. Just once, she gets to plant her own roots and try to figure things out without the fear that everything she invests in will just get swept away from her. It makes sense to me. Before the auditions start, Nene FaceTimes Courtney wearing a Team Courtney shirt, and this honestly made me feel a lot better about how Courtney and how their friendship would be written moving forward. Courtney's support of her friend is finally being reciprocated on camera, and that was really important to me to see for her. While they're about to warm up, Ricky barges in and Gina gives him the softest look I think I've ever seen in my life. Then the whole cast sings Belle as a group vocal warm-up, and we hear how crazy good Lily is. She sounds like a literal Disney princess. Also, not to get ahead of myself too much, but this audition convinced me that Seb should have gotten the Beast, but whatever. I found it very interesting that Lily singles Gina out immediately, believing she will be somewhat of a kindred spirit, and season 1 Gina probably would have been, but this one cares about more than just success. Ultimately, Lily's misread of Gina's character is what leads her to do the group audition with her friends instead of the solo she had been rehearsing. Okay, let's take a break from auditions to check on Nene at her new fancy acting school. As expected, Nene embarrasses herself in her first class exercise. I'm not going to go in on her too much, but all I'll say is I was right that adjusting to a teacher who isn't like Miss Jen is going to be very hard for her. Later, when Dr. Patel talks to Nene about her little mishap, she tells her to trust the outcome, which is in direct contradiction to Miss Jen's motto, trust the process. I thought that scene beautifully highlighted the difference between their teaching styles and why Nene ultimately will not thrive at YAC. It also makes her acceptance into YAC even less believable to me, though, because the show they put on in the winter was a hot mess, so trusting the outcome sounds like a whole lot of... but I digress. In classic Miss Jen fashion, she releases the cast list the same day, so we get a parallel to the season 1 scene, but this time, Ashlyn gets the lead, and we can guess that Big Red got LeFou. The only person who isn't celebrating is Lily. Reminds you of anyone? And we find out Miss Jen didn't cast her because of her nasty attitude. Isn't that part of why she didn't cast Gina as Gabriella last year? They're kind of whacking you over the head with these parallels to make sure you know these girls should be compared. Later that night, the group meets up at Slice's, which becomes the central hangout spot off campus for the rest of the season, and we find out Ricky got the Beast, Courtney got Mrs. Potts, Carlos got Lumiere, Seb got Chip, and Gina got Babette the Feather Duster. Overlaying the scene is Nini's acoustic version of the Yak theme song, which I found very beautiful and felt like a glimmer of season 1. Playing these particular lyrics over the kids with their cupcakes was such a pretty choice, and it kind of showed that Nini could have gotten a lot of what she's looking for at East High if she had just stayed home. The episode ends with Lily watching the kids through the glass and calls North High's drama department. Whether it's to sabotage them or to report back as a spy, we don't know yet, so let's get into episode 3. Valentine's Day! Yay! Nini surprises Ricky with a song for Valentine's Day by traveling home from Yak early. If I saw a random girl in my boyfriend's window the night before Valentine's Day, I might have set the house on fire before asking any questions, so I think she handled things pretty well, all things considered. At the same time, Ricky went to Yak to surprise her with his song, but obviously she wasn't there. I feel like this is another perfect example of how their hearts being in the right place isn't enough because they just aren't ever aligned in any meaningful way. Courtney gets a job at Big Red's family pizzeria, Slice's, as the new assistant manager, and while she's there, we meet Howie, who is rude and black. So obviously we have our first love interest for Courtney. Yay! At school the next day, EJ's wearing all black because it's his first single Valentine's Day and he is in mourning. He wants to be me so bad. We get a talking head of Ashlyn telling us she doesn't fit the iconic belle and how that feels complicated for her. Celebrating a role she really wanted but doesn't feel like she deserved. I'll talk about this more later because truthfully, I was disappointed with how the storyline played out. Okay, so obviously Ricky didn't get to play his new song for Nini because of the travel mishap at the beginning of the episode. So after school, he's practicing for when she can come over and hear it in person. When he hears the doorbell ring, he assumes it's his girlfriend who he hasn't seen since last month, and so he is completely caught off guard when the person at the door isn't his girlfriend, but Gina. I want to take a moment to acknowledge this because it reminded me of the Thanksgiving episode. A lot of Rina's development happens off screen, which is why I can understand how so many people miss it. In season 1, Gina shows up at Ricky's house unannounced, and because this isn't a big deal, it tells the audience that not only has she been there before, but she's probably shown up just like this in the past. Same thing here. We started off the episode with Nini not knowing that Ricky has already moved out of his childhood home to an apartment, but Gina knows where he lives with enough confidence to show up unannounced. Interesting. Also, before I proceed, I'd like to draw your attention to the dark sweatshirt hanging beside the door. I promise to come back to that later. Okay, so it's super awkward when Ricky realizes it's not Nini at the door, but Gina. Is he disappointed? I think so, but I don't think it's because of any negative feelings towards his friend at all. It's Valentine's Day and he's expecting his girlfriend. Any teenage guy would react like he did, I think. And this moment is so tough, and Sophia is so great that she wordlessly conveys how awkward and uncomfortable she is, feeling like she overstepped. She didn't feel that way on Thanksgiving, even though Ricky was surprised to see her then too. Gina explains that the reason she came is because she was sad about her mom not sending her a stuffed bear, their tradition, and she thought Ricky would understand more than anyone else, which he ends up agreeing to. The rest of the scene, I'm just going to play here because I can't explain it. You just have to see it for yourself.
I knew you would. Sorry, there's just some things I tell you that I don't really tell anyone else.
Yeah, no, I think we do that for each other.
Immediately after Ricky takes that step towards her, his phone rings. It rings, and of course it's Nini. While he's walking away to answer, he shushes Gina. I wanted to slap him through the screen. The lights drop out of her eyes immediately. It is so sick. Now I need you guys to be really honest with me here. Do you think if anyone else had been in Ricky's kitchen at that precise moment that he would have shushed them? No, I don't, because he wouldn't have anything to hide. So what about Gina triggers that action out of him? Does he feel guilty on a subconscious level for what could have just happened if she hadn't called right at that moment? I think so, but obviously there are a few different ways to interpret the scene. Anyway, Nini tells him she can't come visit anytime soon, and then Gina suggests he call her back and play his song for her over the phone because every girl likes a sweet gesture, speak from experience. And he responds, I think you'll get yours too. To which she says, I'll live, and walks out before he has a chance to say anything else. At East High, Lily tells Miss Jen she's leaving East High to move up north, whatever the hell that means. When Miss Jen sees that Mazzara is still at school, she asks him if he wants to go get food together. Very brave request on Valentine's Day. Okay, Jen. She put him through unnecessary anguish, though, because as soon as they get there, she sees Ricky's dad across the pizza place and ditches him. So it seems like everybody else who lives in Salt Lake City is at Slice's for their Valentine's dinner tonight, which is funny because it's not like fancy or all that romantic, but it's convenient. So during dinner, Ashlyn opens up to Big Red about how she's been feeling weird in her new role as Belle, and his response is, you're perfect, Ashlyn. I think you should play the princess in everything. I think it was a beautiful sentiment, but it kind of doesn't acknowledge what she's saying at all, that she doesn't feel like she looks like a princess. I don't know, this was not a sufficient resolution to me personally. At another table, Seb gets Carlos a pot and soil so they can have something that grows with them. Cute. We jump to maybe the craziest sequence of the show thus far. A box of chocolates on Ashlyn's front doorstep, the doorbell rings, and then a body in a dark sweatshirt crosses in front of the camera. Gina opens the door and doesn't see anyone, but does find this heart-shaped box of chocolates on the ground with an immediate text from Ricky. Obviously, we will be circling back to this, I promise. Later that night, Seb sends Courtney an arrangement of Beauty and the Beast for her to practice to, and I'm so sorry to say I hated it. I hated it so much. I love her voice, so for such an iconic song, I don't know why they would mess with the arrangement. Why couldn't we just hear the real song? Still mad at this. While she sings, Redland dances alone together at Slice's to her voice, which would have been so much cuter if they didn't mess with the song, but whatever. Now it's the end of the night, and Ricky and Nini try calling each other at the same time, so they both end up getting each other's voicemail boxes and leave a message of the songs they wrote together, which is how we get their adorable duet, which I personally really liked and thought was cute. Almost simultaneously, Gina sends Ricky a happy Valentine's Day text to thank him for the chocolates, and immediately after sending it gets a text from her mom claiming the act. And in Gina's defense, why wouldn't she think the chocolates were from Ricky? The timing of the text was ridiculous. Also, who would deliver something without making sure the recipient sees it? Chocolate deliveries usually aren't just left on the ground like that, at least pre-COVID, which was when this was filmed. And they had just had a conversation about how her mom had forgotten to do something for Valentine's Day. Some people have noticed that when Ricky gets the text from Gina, he has a different text tone than Nini's, and he only reacts to hers. It's possible that's the case, or he just has different tones for different things. The message from Nini is a voicemail, and the message from Gina is a text. Do with that information what you'd like. Anyway, for those of you keeping score at home, all of their Valentine's Days were worse than mine. Bottle episode. As a self-proclaimed TV nerd, these kinds of episodes are always so fun to me. Unfortunately, this one did not do it for me. But let's get into what happened, and hopefully we can keep this one short because I did not enjoy watching this episode and will probably enjoy talking about it even less. Today they're supposed to start rehearsing Be Our Guest, and tensions between Carlos and Gina surface. Even though they're co-choreographers, Gina is not too good at sharing the spotlight, and Carlos is not too good at sharing, period. At rehearsal, Ricky makes a joke to Gina about the chocolates, which tells us that he's not taking it too seriously and doesn't want her to be embarrassed about it. Before the butterflies have left their stomachs from all the flirting, Nini shows up at the rehearsal to surprise her friends, which gave us
Still falling for you. And just like that, all I breathe, all I
When she's ready to leave, Nini's Uber cancels on her because of the snow, so Miss Jen offers to drive her and leaves Mr. Mazzara, Carlos, and Gina in charge. Great idea. While Nini is heading out, she runs into EJ, who admits that he didn't get into Duke, the only school he wanted to go to and where he's like a quadruple legacy. Really interesting that he confides in Nini first. It could be because she's not at school anymore, so he doesn't have to be afraid of facing her every day, or because he still feels emotionally connected to her. I mean, he did tell her he loved her in season 1, so. Miss Jen and Nini finally leave to head to the bus station, and when the cast is finally about to practice, the lights go out. So instead of practicing, they start gathering supplies, and they are definitely acting dramatic, but they're theater kids. Would you complain about student athletes talking about sports all the time? Well, maybe. As they're all running around the school looking for supplies, Big Red takes it upon himself to ask Gina for advice about how Ricky should ask Nini to stay in Salt Lake City for him, and her heart just shatters, but she pulls herself together really fast. Not to be extra offensive right now, because this scene is already so hard to watch, but the bun she's wearing reminded me of season 1 Gina, especially in episode 6, and made me think about where her emotions were with Ricky the last time she had this hairstyle. Just something to think about. Ashlyn asks Gina what she missed in that conversation with Ricky and Red, and we get the first of a few times Gina will snap at Ashlyn, leaving her very confused. Miss Jen and Nini get caught in the snowstorm, and Nini opens up to her about how unhappy she's been at her new school. 3 episodes. The Yak storyline lasted 3 episodes. Let me not get started. Mr. Mazzara comforts EJ in a conversation that is night and day with how he spoke to Ricky a few episodes ago. EJ is bummed about not getting into Duke, and he gives him actionable advice, empathizes with him, and even offers him a spot in the AV club. Interesting. In another hallway, Carlos and Gina argue about this co-choreography conflict, but they work it out pretty quickly. The way this conversation played out annoyed me just a little, because nothing Carlos had to say should have invalidated what Gina was saying, but I digress. It seems like someone was finally going to get to the root of Gina's issue lately when they're interrupted by Howie from the pizza place. He came to deliver pizzas and Courtney's flashcards, and that results in a pretty cute exchange between the two. I'm not really holding my breath here. Like I said before, he's black, and most of his scenes are with Courtney. I'm under no illusions about what his character was introduced for. When the electricity in the school finally comes back on, Ricky rushes out to try to catch Nini at the bus station before she leaves, and they get to hug one more time. Then, as Nini boards the bus, she sings an original song called Granted. While it was overproduced, in my opinion, she has a beautiful voice, the story, the lyrics, they worked, and by the end of the song, she decides she wants to stay in Salt Lake City instead of going back to Denver. 3 episodes. It lasted 3 episodes. She shows up at school and goes straight to Miss Jen's office, which says everything. Miss Jen is the first person Nini comes to, even in a storm. As they're about to leave Miss Jen's office, Ricky FaceTimes her and tells her that he wishes she was staying in Salt Lake City, completely going against the advice Gina and Red had given him earlier that day. The end. Finally. So this episode starts in Seb's barn, where he and Gina have gathered the theater group together to plan a surprise quinceanero for Carlos, since he has always wanted one. Ricky and Nini are acting gross, and it doesn't land because, once again, by this point in time, the actors just had 0 chemistry left. And we got this.
We gathered you guys here tonight because I've got this idea.
Which I still don't think anyone has an innocent explanation for. At school the next day, while Courtney is working on Gina's costume for the quince, Gina says a whole lot of cryptic shit that just
Okay, what are you trying to say right now? Because I need subtitles.
Same girl. Much later, while Ricky and Nene are getting ready for the party, Ricky suggests she ask Miss Jen to let her into the show so they can spend more time together. But Nene says no because she still wants to have alone time to work on her music. The kids did a really great job setting the barn up for the surprise party and all went out of their way to make sure Carlos had no idea. While they're still setting up and getting ready for the birthday boy's arrival, Ricky approaches Gina to ask her for advice about Nene, and this is definitely the most gut-wrenching moment of the show for me so far.
If we were dating and I went behind your back, but for like a good reason, wouldn't you be flattered?
Yeah, Ricky, I'd be flattered.
Okay, cool. You're the best.
But we aren't.
Sorry?
We aren't dating.
Obviously.
So maybe there are better people to confide in about Nene.
Yeah, no, I just...
No, it's fine. I know what you meant.
Armed with somewhat of an endorsement from Gina, Ricky then goes behind Nene's back to ask Miss Jen to put Nene in the show, which ends up being fruitless because obviously it's too late. Just before Gina's solo performance, and first original solo, she shares a heartfelt moment of vulnerability on stage about dancing and Carlos, and we get a split-second reaction from Ricky.
You just keep on dancing.
Yes, we do.
Then she performs a dance inspired by the video Carlos posted on Instagram as a kid. I know the song was meant to show off her dance skills, but honestly, I think this was the first song in the show that actually showed her vocal ability. She has a lower voice than Gabriella, so season 1 didn't show her full true range and how beautiful her voice always was. So this ended up being my favorite song of the season so far. Then the ending, when she places the crown on Carlos's head, shows her growth from the girl we met in season 1. This would have been a beautiful farewell to her character, even though it was very obvious she wasn't going anywhere. Since EJ is filming the event as part of his recent decision to join the AV club, he films Gina's talking head after her performance and they have their first moment. He asked her how she was feeling, and after she answered, she realized he had asked her out of curiosity and not for the sake of the video he was putting together, which meant a lot to her. Let's talk about this for a second. In the last episode, we watched Ashlyn ask Gina over and over. Carlos asked her, and Courtney earlier in this episode asked her how she's doing. What is really going on with her? But for some reason, she didn't really feel seen or like she wanted to answer until EJ asked. Let me know what you thought about that in the comments because that distinction really struck me. Seb serenades Carlos with a gorgeous rendition of The Climb, which left not one dry eye in the barn. Also, while he's speaking, we get this heartbreaking moment between Gina, Ricky, and Nene, where the former watches the couple and accepts that she is on the outside, just like she's always been. When Carlos is giving his speech, he says, "Everybody should have people who just get them." And the camera switches to Gina with tears in her eyes. Carlos chooses Miss Jen as his madrina, which means godmother in Spanish, and EJ loses focus looking at Gina while Mazzara is talking to him, foreshadowing a brewing romantic dynamic between them. Yay! Miss Jen finds out over Instagram that North High jumps ship, literally, and swims to the countryside of France. They're such losers that they had to change their show to Beauty and the Beast to compete with East High directly. I would have been proud if my ex was this pressed over me over a decade after our relationship ended, but I get why it made Miss Jen spiral. We see her looking at a centerpiece of roses, and then she approaches Nene to ask her to join the show to save it, so I guess Ricky is getting exactly what he wanted. The episode ends with Gina calling her mom and telling her she's ready to come home. North High releases a for your consideration type video, like this is the Grammys Like, okay. And the group, specifically Ashlyn, begin to panic. We learn that the kids, or most of the kids, are here on a Saturday per Miss Jen's request for a special weekend intensive. The writers were just doing things at this point, I feel like. Okay, back to the spiral. Miss Jen says that North High is just bells and whistles and all they really need is, and then she trails off. So Seb jumps in and says, friendship? Tell me why. Ricky turns to look at his best friend Gina with a smile. Ricky, what the f***? And she looks away. Ooh, I know that stung. We learned that Miss Jen's genius plan from the former episode was to cast Nini as the Rose and have her and Ricky write an original duet for their two characters. And then we got this amazing middle school relationship coded moment.
The Beast and the Rose.
This dual talking head is so important for establishing Rini's relationship dynamic in season 2, and the writers are showing us their incompatibility in real time. Instead of calling herself the Rose, Nini refers to her character as the Beast Rose, a possession, and the excitement does not meet her face. Then she finds out that Ricky planted the idea in Miss Jen's head and that Miss Jen had not come up with casting her in the show organically. I don't know if anyone has talked about this much, but it kind of brought me back to season 1 when she said she didn't know if she would have gotten Gabriella if EJ hadn't interfered at Camp Shallow Lake the first time. Ricky had done essentially the same thing, out of love, sure, but it was still the same thing. We find out Ricky is a bit on edge today because that evening will be his dad and Miss Jen's first date, and now he's disappointed that after all of that effort to get Nini into the show so they could spend more time together, he doesn't even get to spend the day with her. Is anyone else suffocating, or is that just me? Nini goes to Slices because she has writer's block, and she sees Courtney and Howie flirting in action. Back at school, Miss Jen tells the kids it's time to pair up for a mirroring exercise. Ricky turns to his best friend, Gina, once again, and starts to ask her if they can team up, but she turns around before he can finish, and this is their last chronological on-screen interaction of the season. Their last chronological on-screen interaction of the season. May I remind you that just 3 episodes ago, this man got her chocolates for Valentine's Day that she doesn't know about because he has a girlfriend. Okay, also, is it a coincidence that they're supposed to be mirroring each other in this exercise? I don't think so. That's interesting. Didn't we just have a scene a few minutes ago where he and Nini couldn't get in sync?
We're in total
Disarray.
sync. We'll get there.
But that's something he also desires with Gina, even if subconsciously, and she brushes him off. There are layers in this cake. EJ sweeps right in and asks Gina to be his partner, but we don't actually see the exercise play out because it doesn't matter. They are not the pair that needs to sync up. We jump instead to Miss Jen introducing the next exercise, and Ricky is now cut off from the group and on his phone while Gina is now engaged with the group and sitting next to EJ. Did they just swap roles? Interesting. Gina and Ashlyn get paired up for an improv exercise, and when Ashlyn, in character, asks Gina what her heart is telling her, Gina looks right at Ricky and says, I really don't know. Ashlyn walks off because she's not getting enough from her scene partner, and when Gina tries to apologize privately, Ashlyn snaps back at her. Instead of blowing up on the scene, Gina says, okay, collects herself, and walks out. The camera zooms in on Ricky at this moment, so we only get his reaction, but my guess is he probably files away Gina's coldness today as having nothing to do with him, when in reality, it had everything to do with him. Late at night, Mike brings dinner to East High for his first date with Miss Jen. He also brings 5 questions to really get to know someone, which inspires Miss Jen to ask her students the same questions in character the next day. The next morning, EJ handles his questions really well, but Ricky does not. He clearly came to rehearsal upset about something else, and when Miss Jen tries to push him to investigate his character's feelings beyond the surface, he lashes out at her in front of everyone. Really uncomfortable moment. Later, Gina runs into Ashlyn in the dressing room, and when she's met with more coldness from her roommate, she decides to tell her she'll be leaving soon anyway to live with her mom. This freaks Ashlyn out, and she blames her recent moodiness on the pressure of the play and Mankeys, but Gina assures her that it has nothing to do with her, but it was actually something that happened during opening night that no one knows about. No one? Like, not even us? We then flash back to last year's opening night. Immediately after Ricky and Nene have reconciled, Gina walks in and tells Ricky that she wouldn't quit on them if she wasn't moving away. And then, while both of them are crying, they hug, and that's the end of the flashback. How the hell did we get here? They clearly love each other. What is going on? And the thing that keeps playing over and over in my head is what would have happened if she had come to say goodbye before he reconciled with Nene. Also this happened after. What was he thinking about when he was looking at the dog tag? These are questions I need the answers to. Anyway, I'm not going to say that people who watched the show saw the scene and still thought this pairing wasn't going to be endgame or stupid, but I would be lying if I said they were smart. Back to season 2, Ashlyn asks Gina if she's talked to him about it, and she says Nene's back and he's so happy now. The happiness in question.
I mean, Sundays are kind of our days, right?
Then, I guess I better get back to work.
Thanks. Thank you.
Welcome.
But she has a very important and valid point. When this conversation took place, Gina was leaving and not planning to ever come back. The fact that they had just jumped into a friendship without addressing this huge shared moment means there are things left unsaid that really need to be addressed. So obviously this is foreshadowing a conversation they will have later this season, right? Right? Wrong. When they go back to the practice room, Ashlyn requests her character study be done through a song instead of answering the questions, which gives us, in my opinion, the best Beauty and the Beast cover of the season. Home. Acoustic, unlike most other songs this season, so probably not a coincidence that I liked it so much more. The song brings Gina to tears, and we get this quick masterclass in storytelling through framing. The girls hug and Gina agrees to stay. Back at Slices, after Nene's relentless pasturing, Courtney tells Howie she likes him and he tells her he likes her back. Cute. The next day, Ricky goes to Miss Jen's office and apologizes for how he treated her over the weekend. She tells him that she and Mike decided it was best if they stopped seeing each other, to Ricky's immediate relief. The episode ends with Nene playing her Rose song for Courtney over voicemail. Adored it. Without a doubt, my favorite original song of this season. Olivia wrote this one herself, and you can tell. So incredibly clever, and a perfect glimpse into Nene's POV and her relationship with Ricky, even if she's not ready to talk to him about it. We get a hint of that because she asks Courtney not to tell Ricky about it. The duet that they're supposed to sing together. She doesn't want him to know about it yet. You're telling me people watched this episode, filmed before Sour came out, and still have the audacity to argue that Ricky and Nene were supposed to end up together? Like I said before, I won't call you stupid, but I certainly will not be calling you smart either. Unbeknownst to Nene, Carlos secretly filmed her song, and based on his corny line, we can assume he will be posting the video to scare North High. The end. One question I did want to address before ending this video was the lighting in this season. It's a lot darker, which is, I'm not even going to say that's just a High School Musical show issue. This was like an industry-wide initiative to ruin our eyes, I think. But for season 2, it's not just, even though that's what people usually talk about, the lighting being different, it's not just the lighting that has changed, it's also the framing of the shots. In season 1, it was very much framed like a regular sitcom without a live studio audience. Normal, that's what I would expect it to look like. Season 2, they start to frame everything cinematically instead of remaining consistent with the way they had shot season 1. So it's very jarring, not just the color changing, it's jarring to now see these wider shots, and I'll try to put 2 pictures of the same set next to each other to give you guys a better idea of how it's really not just the color that changed. It's everything about the way they directed season 2 that is a different show. But since the question was on lighting, I did want to touch on this. No, it's not that they are turning down the lights necessarily on set and could just turn them right back up. There's something called color grading, which I'll try to leave a definition for right here. My theory is that that's what happened. They color graded it darker than they did in season 1. And the reason I think it's color grading and not lighting during production is because when we go to the flashback scene, that is so very clearly filmed in season 1. That was not filmed now. The kids, they still looked like Ricky and Gina still looked like children, and they look a lot older in season 2. So they wouldn't have been able to pull that off. They clearly filmed that same cameras, same lighting setup, same everything as the Ricky and Nini love confession scene from season 1, which is a lot brighter. And then the flashback is very dark. And that's when it occurred to me that that's because they graded it that way in post-production. This was an intentional choice in post-production to darken everything. Whether or not that is an intentional decision because of the storyline and where things were going, it's winter, maybe that's why they went darker. I'm not sure, but I can say pretty confidently I didn't prefer it. I liked the way that they filmed, edited, shot season 1 better personally. It's not that season 2 is bad. I just think that season 1 was actually leaning into the mockumentary style, and season 2 knew that they had started with that, so they couldn't drop it. But there were other elements now introduced into how they were shooting season 2 that felt incongruous with the mockumentary style. And instead of just sticking to what they had established in season 1 to not throw their viewers off, they just ended up mixing the elements. Then it's like, it doesn't feel like a mockumentary anymore. It's not, I don't know. I wasn't a fan of that, but I did want to point out, at least acknowledge that specific question, because it was very much a choice. So originally I wanted to make one video about the whole season, but it got so long that I decided to cut it in 2. Thank you to everyone who commented here and on Twitter with questions they wanted me to address. I tried to squeeze a lot of them into this video, but I'm going to spend more time answering in part 2. So make sure you're subscribed for that one, and feel free to add any more questions you think of in the comment section below. In the meantime, if you haven't already, make sure to check out my season 1 analysis video, and I hope to see you all very soon. Mwah.